I would think that one of those right? But yeah. Oh, good playing this year. Great. So we can do it. Okay. Okay, I'm going to take out my mouthpiece while I talk, and then we'll swap. Okay. Hi there. Hi. Welcome everyone to the Illinois Valley Soil and Water Conservation District Town Hall.
All right, that was a mouthful.
I'm going to take off my mask just while I'm talking, and then I'm going to kind of introduce things briefly and then hand it to Chris. My name's Elliot Feenstra. I'm the co-artistic director of a theater company called Beyond Boom and Bust with Sophie Traub, which is a project of using performance and theater to cultivate economic resilience. And so our focus has also been on cannabis, and Chris invited us here to help facilitate and co-hold this. So mostly I'm just kind of setting things up, and then I'll hand it to Chris. So today, Chris is going to be sharing back information and maps that he's created through the extensive community research that probably many of you have participated in. This will be pretty informal, which is to say, at any point, if you have a question you want to ask, you're welcome to ask it. There will also be time in the middle and at the end where we say, okay, are there questions? How's this landing? And the second goal of today, besides sharing back that information, is to take action together, to give some pathways that we collectively can make an impact. So if you're leaving early, there are a bunch of letters and how to write a letter and targets for decision makers who can make a difference. So if you are leaving early, make sure to get those from Tracy. Otherwise, we'll have some time at the end for everyone to write, sign letters, sign petitions, and everyone will get those copies. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping things. The state guidelines are that we wear masks. So we'll be wearing masks except when we're speaking, and that's just because for some people being able to see each other's lips helps, and we're pretty distant from you. So if you aren't wearing a mask and you would like one, there are some masks in the back corner. Bathrooms are out and to the right, or if you're at home, they're at your house. We are recording this on Zoom, and it'll be available online afterwards. So if you are in conversation with other people who want this information, that's a good way to share it with them. And parking, don't block the fire trucks. If you parked in a way that the fire trucks can't get out, then undo that, but I don't think anyone did. There's water in the back. I think that's it. Great. Okay, with that, I'll hand it to you, Chris. Yeah.
Thank you, Elliot. All right, thanks for coming out, everybody, to the town hall where we're going to take it into Act 2. Act 1 was setting up and collecting community sentiment and doing research and finding out just what's going on and how do people feel about it. Act 2 is now we're going to take action. We're going to look at what the community sentiment was. We're going to look at a map that I've worked on that has been inventorying cannabis and hemp farms throughout the Illinois region. And we're going to then take action. We're going to be the folks who help circulate petitions. We're going to go and help write letters, and we're going to be the valley that roared. So can we switch into a full screen of the little presentation here? Starting off, we're going to have a brief history of what went on so we know how did we get here today, because a lot of people ask me how we got here today. I will say, for starters, the Illinois Valley has a proud history and a rich cultural heritage of growing cannabis on a small scale in your backyard, 24 plants, 48 plants. When I moved here in 2012, there were like rumors of someone's got a garden that's got 96 plants, you know, and it's all OMMP, Oregon Health Authority, licensed. And, but most people, like, you know, they had 12, 24, 48. It always seemed to be that kind of number. And for 60 or 70 years, growing cannabis in your backyard was never an existential threat to the region. It was an element of our cultural heritage. We put food on the table, we put kids through college, we paid our mortgages, and we were able to like live out in a rurally isolated region where we could actually like, you know, survive. And we all, you know, had each other's backs and it was not a problem. That was like right up until about 2016 when we passed Measure 91 and we started to like move through what was largely believed to be the dream. We're going to legalize cannabis. It should never have been made illegal originally in 1937. However, what happened is that virtue signaled to a lot of people who never had any intention of like joining the regulated community and working within the laws. And everybody literally came out of the closet and came up to this area, which has, because of its rural isolation, very little money for enforcement. There's also a rich aspect of our cultural heritage about like, please don't come onto my property. We respect private property rights. We respect our privacy. We didn't move to a region that's one of the most isolated places on earth to then be in the middle of a downtown where people are always knocking on your door. So what happened is that a lot of folks started to come into the community. There was a lot of resentment by people who said, what happened to the 2-year requirement? What happened? Let's make it 5 years, you know? You have to live in the region before you can actually be permitted to like, you know, grow cannabis or something like that, at least through the OLCC. And then what happened is that the number of cannabis grows started to increase. And nobody ever did any inventory in the past, so we don't know by how much. But I can tell you that the reason why you're here today and why the community is in such an uproar is that in the last couple of years, it really went off the hook. So as this community continued to grow more and more cannabis, and this is not just the Illinois Valley, but it's like California, and it's just about everywhere else in the Pacific Northwest, we ended up oversupplying the market. That drove prices down, you know, to a price that was almost so low that it wasn't profitable, or even, you couldn't even break even in some cases. And so there was this move to go into hemp, which was a wonderful opportunity. And so everyone moved into hemp. And there was just an enormous amount of hemp planted in 2018 and 2019. But the market collapsed and cratered because the FDA refused to acknowledge CBD. And now you can't put CBD into toothpaste or sunscreen or dog food or whatever. There's no market for CBD. And so all of a sudden the hemp market dropped by 30 or 40% every year. But then in 2020, the light bulb went off and they said, hey, let's make Delta-8 THC. And we can take the CBD molecule and we can run it through a bunch of processes in our labs and we can spit out Delta-8 THC, which is just a very near cousin to Delta-9. And it doesn't quite get you as high as Delta-9 does, but it does the job. And now what you can do is you can take that like honey liquid and you can put it into vape pens, and you can also spray it onto like boutique trimmed hemp that doesn't get you high, but once you spray it on, now you get yourself a smokable product that gets you high. And so that was getting sold on the black market, and then the vape pens were showing up in every Speedy Mart across the nation in 7-Elevens. States across the country back in March of 2021 were very much aware of what was going on, and they're like, man, we need to regulate that stuff. And so they started to like draw up drafting ideas of how to regulate it like Delta-9. And then that's a big shout out to Lily Morgan, our representative in the House up in Salem, who spearheaded a wonderful bill called HB 3000, which then went to regulate Delta-8. And you know, I'll just say making Delta-8 is not cheap because you got to go and grow the hemp, you got to harvest it, you got to dry it, you got to spit it through your machine to spit out the CBD and then turn that into Delta-8 THC. Why not just grow pot, right? So Delta-9 is much easier to grow. And so then, and everybody was talking about, and I was on a lot of WhatsApp groups, so I know what I'm talking about. Everybody was like, man, we're just gonna go and rush back into the Delta-9 market and we're all gonna grow. And they're like, yeah, we're gonna oversupply the market. So then everybody was like, well, we gotta beat to market. In the last few years, there was a lot of light death where you deprive the light by pulling a tarp over your pot. And you know, if you make it seem like it's later in the year, you can harvest at the end of July, and you can be a month ahead of the main fall harvest, and you can get a really good deal for your cannabis, and you make a lot of money. People actually started doing that in the previous years so they could actually pay their trimmers for the big fall harvest, and they could deal with all these overhanging costs they had from like the startup of that year anyway. Well, now this year, everybody jumped into it, and they actually did not just light dip, but they did autoflower, which are seeds. You put them in the ground, 10,000 per acre. They get about this tall in about 10 weeks. You get about a quarter to half a pound, depending on how good a farmer you are. And you can make, quite a bit of money off of 1 acre, and there's not even breaking a sweat. No tarps, no nothing. And so what we saw this year was an extraordinary change in the way cannabis was grown. And it was like the zeitgeist was like everyone's gonna just go right into greenhouses. And it wasn't really clear at first just how everyone got to know this, but there's a lot of communication and chat. And so essentially that's what happened. We saw greenhouses this year like we have never seen before. And everybody's trying to beat the market. This year, sales at the municipal bulk water station dropped a month early. They went from 5.5 million gallons to 3.1 million gallons. This is from information of a public records request. And so why is the water in bulk water sales dropping by 2.4 million gallons from August to September, when theoretically that's like the hottest, driest part of the year? And that's because they'd harvested all their early pot. So anyway, that's how we got to where we are this year. This is how we got to the big scramble. And before I go any further, I'm just going to say it's possible that because of the extraordinary amount of pot that was grown this year, it could end up being cheaper than carrots. And that's going to cause a lot of gnashing of teeth, and it's going to be really difficult. There is one OLCC farmer that I have spoken to through another person. One person who works with them as a scientist said, yeah, they can't even afford to trim it. It's just being stored in their barns because trimming a pound would be more expensive than what they could get for the fully trimmed pound. So they just can't do anything with it. John Gardner, yes.
Is it worth mentioning that a number of people try to hide so-called marijuana within hemp?
Yeah, and we will get to that. There were some hemp farms that failed HB 3000 regime testing, and it was because they were actually trying to use the hemp program as cover for growing THC. But actually, from the public record requests I've gotten, it's a surprisingly small number. There's like 80 hemp farms in all of Josephine County. About half of them were in the Illinois Valley. That's 40 or more. And then half of them failed. So about 20 of them were legit and 20 failed. All right, so we're going to move on to the community sentiment issues. So what we did was we held a number of town halls. We tabled at the farmers market. There was a lot of social media interaction. And we came up with a lot of questions that people had about what was their concerns and what were their concerns. And there are major headings: water concerns. There were negative impacts, such as like to the environment, to water quality, to the way of life, that sort of thing. Enforcement, and really the lack thereof. When I call so-and-so, it's like nothing ever happens. And where is the enforcement? Public health concerns, which include code issues. Those are major concerns. Cartels, and cartels actually, it's a misnomer. I'm not going to get into why. I mean, it's really just businesses that work together illegally. And really what it means is out-of-towners coming and setting up gigantic illegal industrial operations that oftentimes have a lot of human rights violations going on, and they're also very negatively impacting the environment. And the last one is fear and danger. The people in this valley who are tough and don't get scared easily, and are like the salt of the earth, did not feel safe this summer with what they saw going on, and I think that speaks for itself. You will see here a pie chart with these main concerns. And again, these are the same ones I just listed. Out of a total of 744 concerns, in order, water concerns were the major big concerns. Water is life, right? And what's the old saying? Whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. People are concerned about water. The negative impacts, and backing up to water concerns. Water theft, drought, pumping from the stream and well illegally, and then selling municipal water were the big concerns. Negative impacts, water quality, negative impacts like the negative impact on my way of life, and environment, and then just outright greed. I was surprised at how big greed was. Enforcement, laws, and corruption. People are very concerned about no enforcement, the officials ignore us, and the existing laws are insufficient. I'm going to take this moment to say right now, nobody is working harder than Sheriff Dave Daniel. And when he says he's dealing with a fire hose, he doesn't even know how bad that fire hose is. And when we get to the picture of this map that I've made, you'll get a better understanding of just like what he's up against, okay? What law enforcement was able to do this year is, you know, they would do more if they could, and what they did was extraordinary. There are gonna be some really sad folks who don't get to have their property anymore if that stuff goes through, and I believe that that's what they're working on. So anyway, Sheriff Dave Daniel gets a big hand from me, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate what he did and all the partners that he worked with. All right, moving on. So we're gonna go and take a look at some of the things that you guys saw and that you were experiencing that really, you know, burnt your britches. And this is like a little slideshow here of some stuff that were pictures of, I went on to CubeRx the day after it got busted. These are, some of those pictures are here. These are pictures from around the area. That's a water tank, and then that's a big old pile of fertilizer, and that's a 55-gallon drum of isopropyl alcohol. That was just a tower of, you know, fertilizer, and who knows, you know, I mean, how many of those things are all over the valley, too much, didn't get to using it, you know, just gonna leach into the soil. Maybe that's what they were trying to burn recently, because you recall that there were fires burning on that ranch. We go to the next slide. This is from one of the bulldozed images of the CubeRx ranch, and I call that dozer mixed media. And that image right there, it's quite a work of art and sculpture, but it shows you essentially what was required in order to stop these people from coming back in, because the sheriff would come in, you know, bust the place with, like, you know, however many agencies, and 3 days later, they're all coming back, you know, and replanting. And so the county got an order from judges to be able to, like, destroy property, not all the property, just the stuff that's illegal. Moving on to the next page. What does it look like when this thing catches on fire? Last Saturday, okay, 8 days ago, the Illinois Valley Fire Department was called out onto a fire, and this is an Illinois Valley Fire Department picture that they posted on Facebook, and so everyone's already seen this picture, but it's that pile on fire, okay? Burning PVC, burning sheet plastic, burning like gigantic water tanks, and burning anything that it, you know, can burn. And you know, one of the sad things I'll say is that I've put a couple miles of PVC in the ground as a farmer over the course of the last, what, 10, 15 years with my backhoe. And I gotta tell you, when I put PVC in the ground, I think, well, great, for 40 years, I'm gonna be like running cool water through that at 2 foot below ground, right? And that's what PVC was made. Well, they turned PVC this year into a single-use plastic. And PVC happens to be one of those things that you don't want to be around when it's being built, and you don't want to be around when it's being destroyed. The period in between is perfectly fine, and it's healthy, and it's not a problem for the environment, and you can drink through it. But catching that stuff on fire, there's a small evil there. I recently saw another fire down in O'Brien last week. It was around 5 o'clock, and it was a fire just like that. There were a couple of guys who were just tossing things into it, and it looked like, man, that's what you're gonna do all night long, right? Anyway, moving on. This is a pump that's in the river. It's a small pump, and it's actually a ditch, and I think it's the Kirby ditch, or it's one of them in Kirby. Anyway, you know, a small little pump like that is dragging water out of the creek all the way along, all night long. They just keep running it 24/7, change the oil, and they're filling giant tanks, right? You can't throw a 3-inch pump into that creek because you dry it out in 5 minutes, but you can trickle out of it constantly, and that's what they do. They put these little straws in the ditches and the creeks and the rivers everywhere. And when they ain't got one of those, they go and call a drilling company, and they put a well in, and then you start sucking from that, you know? And of course you need a water rate for all of this. Water rates have a point of diversion, which is a very specific location, and then they have a place of use where you can use it. And that's not legal. Moving on. This is a dead bear. This bear died in Selma, last Wednesday. And this bear had been in that neighborhood, living in that neighborhood. It was always like a sight to see, oh, look, there's the bear. And funny, it should just show up dead all of a sudden. You know what it takes to kill a bear? It takes a high-powered rifle or a bunch of poison or some other, like, you know, horrendous thing, because they're not easy to take down. And the story goes that when OSP came out, you know, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, it wasn't get shot. So I don't know, you figure out what killed that bear. My guess is that it could have been poisoned, but that's a real tragedy. And one of the major community sentiment issues we heard of is the wanton killing of wildlife. That is one of the top ranked concerns regarding like negative impacts. And you know, if anybody's heard all the gunshots this summer on these grows, you wonder what they're shooting at. Well, maybe it's not such a mystery anymore. Moving on. This is just one example how many water trucks we saw on the road. And the only reason why I point this one out is because it's got no license plate, you know? It's got a broken suspension on the passenger side. It's listing really badly. And yes, there is no driver's there's no just license plate. And how many people saw like water trucks all over the valley without any kind of like license plates, you know?
Every day.
Yeah, every day, right? And, you know, the sheriffs were busting them left and right, but you could never get them all. And as soon as they would put them into impound, they come and peel off 100 after 100 after 100 and slap down $1,500, drag that thing out of impound and just put it back on the road, you know? And just never bothered registering them, you know? And there's no one who's stopping them at the municipality because they don't have the resources to do that. Moving on. This is just a picture of Chapman Creek. That's that road is Highway 46, and it's coming up on Smith Sawyer. But you know, I just thought I would point out. Look at the density there. You know, this is a perfectly legal OLCC grow. Let's give them a big hand. Cheers. Yes. Their neighbors, maybe not so much. And you know what this OLCC head grow has to do? They have to compete with all those other grows that are not legal. And the OLCC grow has regulations that are just extraordinary. And that's what it takes to, you know, be within the system. Yes?
How do you know that one's legal?
Because I've been around for a long time and I know who owns it. Yeah. Anyway, they're the A students, and the folks around them, you know, are just cranking it out and competing with them. And you can see actually that it used to be this big. Now it's that big. Well, you know, 1 acre. So you can do up to 1 acre, and even they had to shrink their operation. So, you know, how can they compete, right? Let's move on to the next slide. So we're going to move on to the map of the valley. The following images are from one big map. It's a picture of Selma, Kirby, midsection of Holland, and the south section. The map is big. It's hard to, you can see it like right here. In fact, actually, I could blow this map up 20 feet tall, and you could walk right up to the person with like the pitchfork. That's how detailed this map is. Just a little background. You can see the numbers here, the letters. These are 1 by 2 inch little squares. Each one of these, in reality, is a 16 inch by 8 inch at 300 DPI. And so, okay, well, so I'll explain how this map happened. So I got into a plane. I want to thank the sheriff for hooking me up with a plane. The plane was one of those cute little tail draggers with the high wings. I rented a ultra high definition video camera with a brick that sat on my lap that could record a terabyte of data with a nice screen on top, super high definition. Put it out this big car window and pointed it straight down against 80-mile-an-hour winds, and for 3.5 hours flew in a north and south grid, the whole entire valley, and like 3 gigabytes per minute. It's just a huge amount of data. I brought it back in. I have the suite of Adobe programs and went through and extracted about 250 or more video stills from all that information. And then every single still, I went through and just cut out every single grow and dragged it from one big screen to another big screen into Adobe Illustrator. And that's where I built this base map first, and that's where I dropped every one of them on. I can assure you that this is 100% precise. I could take a room half this size and put it within about 3 feet of where it exists in reality and scale it to its exact size because of the detailed aspect of this map. The biggest issue I ran into is like, where does this greenhouse, like cluster of greenhouses go? I don't know where it goes. I'm like sitting there for 10 minutes trying to figure it out because they clear cut the area and it's really hard to figure out where you're gonna place that when you clear cut the area. So it took a little finagling, and I in the end, I always made sure I got it right. It just was a little slower. Anyway, this is what the map looks like without the background. And so here's Selma, here's Kirby, here's Honolulu, here's Takilma, and here's O'Brien. And we're gonna go through and see this map in sections right now on the screen because it's just too big to see. And can we move on to the next picture? So here's Selma. And you recognize this. And these little specks here are all the greenhouses. And it's kind of hard to see against the background because, you know, it's a lot of green. It looks quite good on a big screen. But let's go to the next one and take the background away. There's Selma. Still there.
What are those, Chris?
So every one of these here is a cannabis grow. 85%, mind you, of everything you see is not legal. And I'll get to the data as to why I have that number. And you know what the sheriff said at the city council meeting on September 13th, when he was asked, he said, you know, upper 70s, low 80s. Well, he was right. It's about 84.5% is what my figures tell me. So the sheriff busted this one here. This one over here is the 34-acre property that, along with one other property, had about 250,000 plants. That's the one he busted in June up in Selma. So by the time I flew over on August 2nd, all I saw was like what looked like toilet paper everywhere. It was just a disaster. And you know, that's what it takes in order to keep these folks from coming back. So the smallest specks that you see here are gonna produce 250 to 500 pounds. Okay, that's the scale that we're talking about here. You know, it's hard to see like, oh, how big is this stuff, right? And you know, you can't see any of this from the road. It's just invisible. The only way you can see is if you go overhead and you look down. So, so what we're seeing here is what no one else really gets to see unless you go overhead. And what I'll also say is that because no one has ever inventoried the cannabis grows pretty much, I believe, anywhere, that no one's really ever been able to get a scope or a sense of the scale of what it's like. And just, you know, when somebody complains, like, you won't believe what I live around, it's like, well, now maybe they will. And when you try to explain to a decision maker who's an elected or appointed official what's going on, you know, they've got a lot of other things to deal with, right? Just pot growing in the Illinois Valley does not always reach the top of the list, right? Well, I think when they start to see what we're talking about, it's gonna be a big change. Can we go to Kirby? So this is the Sowers Flat, and I'm gonna be the first one to say there is not a drop of pot being grown on Cron Farms, let me tell you. However, next door on the QBRX Ranch, which is a 1,300-acre ranch, that thing had 6 greenhouses. They were all about 200,000 square foot clusters, 5-acre clusters. So I'm saying basically there was about 1.25 million square feet of greenhouse that was set up. It's just insane how big that was. There were like 130 people that were retained when that bus went down, and another 50 who actually took off. It was a really big operation. And you can see that the greenhouses are here, here, here. And this was actually taken, this flyover on August 2nd was like a week before it got busted. So anyway, these pictures down here, you know, that I could always zoom in at a later date and show you. They're like what were essentially vernal pools that they just went in and dug out. Just incredible. So here they are, these big grows just running right up and down. And this is Highway 199, right through here. So, you know, it snakes right through here.
What did you say the pools were?
They were vernal pools. They looked, to me, they looked like they were vernal pools, which are just really low depressions, you know, where there's some water. And they just went through, I mean, the detail.
They're hanging along the side of the river, you mean?
Actually, no, they're just right here, these depressions. So the river is right here, and these are in probably a couple hundred, 300-400 feet. But the point I'm making is that there were depressions, and when you go and you look close at the zoom in, it's like dunes. They like just didn't even berm it up properly or anything. It's just a mess. And right now, all that's gonna start melting in the rains and sifting out and silting into the river.
Like they dug really big holes?
Yeah, they dug really huge holes. And I mean, you need a water right permit from the Water Resources Department to pull that off. So this is what it looks like in Kirby. That's, we're gonna go take a look at what I call South Central CJ. This is the middle section of Cave Junction. We've got the airport down here, and we've got Holland Loop. And this is, historically, this has just been basically grasslands and a few like vineyards, right? There were families that would have small pot gardens in the backyard, 24, 48 plants. This is, there was never really a lot of water rights usage because, if there was hay, it was usually just a single cutting, you get the range, you might do a little bit of irrigation. But let's take the background away and have a look. That is one giant DEQ violation, in my opinion. There's so much plastic right there, so much PVC, and half of it is gonna like just rot into the ground over the winter. Some of it's getting taken to the dump, and some of it's getting burned. And I'm pretty sure, I don't have evidence for this, but I'm pretty sure the plastic that was purchased this year wasn't the 6-year greenhouse plastic that, withstands ultraviolet radiation. It was that cheap Viscamine that you can go buy. And so the white stuff, it crumbles and shatters over the course of getting hit all summer long by the sun, and then the winter is just gonna beat it up. And so there's gonna be 100 million little pieces of like sheeting plastic if it doesn't get cleaned up properly. Meanwhile, there's all this PVC that's, who knows what's gonna happen. So here is White Schoolhouse Road, and Smith Sawyer Road, White Schoolhouse Road, and right here is Highway 46. How many of you guys saw these big ass greenhouses right here? If I took these two and put them overlaid downtown Cave Junction, you'd be like, oh my God, it takes up like half of Cave Junction, the whole downtown. And that's how big these are, okay? And they did not have any licensing whatsoever, zero, not a single, they weren't on the ODA hemp list. Obviously, there were about 10 acres worth of greenhouses, and you can't have more than 1 acre if you're OLCC unless you got multiple tax lots. It was completely illegal, and the ODA knew about it the whole year, but you know what? There was really little they could do for a lot of reasons, political reasons. It's not for a lack of wanting to, I can promise you that. And so anyway, they harvested early, like mid-August, got out of there, and then just in the last couple of weeks, one of the neighbors was like, Chris, all the workers went out there and they brought their machetes and they're hacking down the greenhouses with machetes. And I suppose if you sharpen your machete hard enough and you come at it at an angle, you can cut through a piece of 1-inch PVC pipe in one fell swoop. And that's what they did. They took all this PVC that was used to build those things and just hacked them to the ground into pieces that were big enough to pile. And your guess is as good as mine as to what they're gonna do with all that PVC. I don't know. Anyway, that right there tells you, what's going on. And here's this base map. If I actually do the reverse and I take away the pictures that I dragged onto it and you just get the background, it just looks like it used to in 2019 or 2018 or 2017. This is this year. And again, to like wrap your head around that, it's just mind-boggling. And you can also see, you see how there's an arc right here? Here's the river, Sucker Creek, and then there's Old House Creek, and there's East Fork coming up. It's got this gorgeous like arc to it. You take away the background, you still see the arc. So let's go to the next slide. You see how there's see how there's an arc right there? You can basically follow the water channels. And I'll just say, that's a lot of water theft. And let's move on to the next picture. Thank you. So this next picture is Tequila on the bottom right and O'Brien on the bottom left. And you're catching a little bit of Holland Loop in the upper hand corner there. For folks who live in O'Brien, this is your neighborhood here and here. And you can't even really fully understand at this level what it's like to live in O'Brien. There are folks who have spoken to me about their life in O'Brien, and it's just like, it's obscene. Just the impacts that they have to live with every single day. And we're told, don't interact with these people, don't get near them, don't do any of this, like you're no vigilante type of thing, and you're not expected to get near them. Well, you live next to them. What are you supposed to do? Move? So So that's a pretty dense area of O'Brien. And then coming into Tequila here, you know, and Tequila has a long, rich history of growing cannabis too. It has some nice OLCC farms down there, which are really well run. Big shout out to East Fork Cultivars, you guys are great. They're doing a wonderful job, but there's also just a lot of just outright, you know, large scale grows that are pretty negatively impacting. All right, so we're gonna go see some of the close-ups now real briefly. This right here is where the sheriff bulldozed and took out the Selma 34-acre grow that was illegal back in June. And that's what I meant, like when it looks like it's a bunch of toilet paper. I want to point out that I also cut out and put in their 25 to 30 foot deep water holes. And that's what the sheriff said how deep they were. There's one here. These are huge, by the way. There's one here, there's one here, there's one here. Again, you need an act of God to take a spoon and stick it in the ground and start removing the earth, you know, because the Water Resources Department requires you to get a water right to impound water. And these guys, they just came out and hired somebody with an excavator and just dug. And just never stopped until they hit the water table.
How are the excavators doing this without getting caught? I mean, don't the tobacco people know that they're doing something wrong?
So there are, you know, I mean, I was asked the same question too, like why are these bulk water sales happening? Don't they know that it's all going to, you know, cannabis farms? Upton Sinclair, who's a famous American author from the 20th century, said it's hard to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it, right? So people, it's amazing, just the reason why one of the negative impacts that was greed was such a big one was because people are stunned. They have the same question. I don't understand, like, are you really gonna, you'll do anything for money? And apparently, yes. So this is Lake Selmac at the top right here, and these are all on top of this hillside. So if you come up on Reeves Creek Road through here, you can't see those. You could smell them, but you can't see them. And those things are massive. And I wonder where they're getting their water from. They are just south of the bottom corner of Lake Selmac. And the lake is right there, thank you. And so it's just the bottom corner of Lake Selmac, and these grows are like right up against it there.
Those are off
Reeves Creek, yeah. Yeah, and you would, you know. So let's go to the next one. So these are the two I said that if you put them together and overlay downtown Cape Junction, you'd be like, are you kidding me? These things are, so this is 200 feet. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, that's 1,200 feet. That's almost a quarter mile, just short of a quarter mile. Okay, there's two of them. And they're right in between White Schoolhouse Road on the right and Smith Sawyer on the left, right? By any estimation, this little grow right here would be considered ultra gigantic like 4 years ago. Now it's like doesn't even show up on the radar screen. I don't know what the status of that little one is, but I'll tell you that this one here, no ODA hemp license. And clearly, because it's so big, no OLCC license. And you know, it was just like right out in the open all summer long. And I mean, there might have been dozens of complaints about this, that, the other. And you know, the authorities were busy getting to it. I'm sure it was on the list. And then before you know it, he harvested and was out of there and just, okay, there's nothing to bust anymore.
Chris, where was that one?
This is between, on the left here is Smith Sawyer, and on the right is White Schoolhouse, and on the north is Caves Highway. So it's what's that? Yeah, it's just gorgeous flat ground. Those are the ones that were all hacked apart with machetes this past week or so.
So those guys, I mean, that's garbage to them, man. They took the product.
Yeah.
And then that is just gone.
It's all single-use plastic. Those are steel framed? Okay, so then the other property was? Okay, Mike Gierke in the back here, he is an OLCC regulated licensed grower who lives in the neighborhood. And let's give him a big hand.
Property right to the right of it, or you see the one greenhouse right there, that's a 25 acre right there. That should give you a reference.
Well, just harvesting that and moving it, but, I mean, you can't do that just with nobody seeing it. Why is?
So I received 2 calls that all of this was being harvested at night because it was really hot during mid-August, and you run and harvest at night. Generators running, trucks filling up, whatever. But basically cutting them down and chucking them in the trucks. There was no hanging the stuff right off the bat. Let's go to the next slide. So this is just another example of the density. You can just see there's the river. And it's like bam, 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 bam. And I'll tell you, this one right here is a legal OLCC farm. And that farmer appealed to the county this summer and said, hey, I'd like to expand my 3 greenhouses to 3 more. Even if they did that, you still wouldn't see them on that map. They are up against all that other activity.
Where's that road?
That's up and down Rockydale Road. All right, next slide. Oh, so somebody lives here, and they're just surrounded, right? Can you imagine, what that must be like to live there? That's in the southwest portion of the region. I'm not going to be any more detailed than that. Let's go to the next slide. The Illinois Valley, can we do a little hide scene there? You can put it above. All right, so that's our little slideshow there. So we're going to move on to a little more of a discussion now. The Illinois Valley Soil and Water Conservation District, which has been around since 1949.
Sorry, I just wonder if you want us to pause and ask the questions, because this is kind of the moving into action part.
Thank you.
Do you want to pause and see if there's any questions before we move on to what do we do about it?
Can we go throw up or something?
Yeah.
Chris, I want to thank you. That's an excellent presentation. I can see your hard work. Hours and hours that you've done this. Yeah, thank you very much. State representatives and our federal elected officials, each should. Everybody needs to be up to par with what's going on. It's terrible.
So you took the words out of my mouth, and in fact, you can come up and give the rest. That's what we're doing next. Yep. And again, I just want to. Yes.
What you call them 14 days.
Oh, come on, John.
No, it's right what the gentleman said. Absolutely right. There's only one person who can do this, right?
I grew up on a farm. I don't know anything different. Right.
Where is the illegal product? Where is it being sold? Who's buying it?
That's a very good question, and it's only full of speculation. It's believed that the cannabis, well, okay, just so you know, what was grown in the Illinois Valley this year would be enough to supply the entire state of Oregon for the next 6 generations, okay? I mean, it's just, there's no way to fully comprehend. And so that pot, it's possibly going to the East Coast, but now they're growing a bunch of weed out there too, right? So then maybe there's not such a demand. There is unfounded rumor and speculation that Eastern European cartel growers that influxed the region this year are trying to figure out how to get it on shipping containers back to Europe. I don't believe that for a second. I don't know how they could pull that off. So I don't know. I mean, it's a very good question. Tracy?
Well, I was gonna say that when it was legalized in Oregon, it was said that none of it was gonna leave the state, right? That's still illegal to ship it out of the state.
There is no interstate commerce in the United States at this time, so you may not cross borders with it. There's an interesting thing here. The Oregon State Police cannot go and bust somebody who crossed the state border into Idaho, right? So the only way they ever know that this stuff is leaving is when another state picks it up, right? It's one of those things. Tracy?
How do you figure that of it is like unlicensed illegal crop.
And I would like to point out, Tracy is the Conservation Program Manager at the Soil and Water Conservation District, and your question was again?
How do you figure that 85% are illegal?
Great question. I'll be quick about this. So, nothing like public records requests, right? There's some information that you can get. One of them is how many OLCC cannabis grows are there in Josephine County? There's just a little over 200 producers in Josephine County. A little more than half of that is in the Illinois Valley. So about 100 to 110 or so. Legal OLCC grows in the valley. Hemp. Well, there's 80 registered ODA registered hemp grow sites in Josephine County, and probably a little more than half of those are in the Illinois Valley. Because remember, you got all that area about Grants Pass and Murphy and Williams and so forth. So that's like 40. But the HB 3000 testing regime came in. They tested all those, not all of them, but of the hemp farms that they tested, half or so failed. So out of the 80, there's 40 or more in the Illinois Valley, and then of those 40, about 20 were actually hemp farms, and the other 20 failed because they were THC. Then there is, yes, Mike. Yeah, so the OMMP, the Oregon Health Authority manages the OMMP. There are 971 OMMP, OHA licensed farm or grows essentially in Josephine County, okay? Well, if you go and you look at the rate across the state, 92.7% are 12 plants or less. 7.3% of those numbers are actually between 13 and 48, and then there's like 4 or 5 across the whole state that are bigger than 48 but less than 99. So of the 971 grows that are in Josephine County, probably more than half are in the Illinois Valley, and of that, about 7% are from 13 to 48 plants. And I'll remind you, 13 to 48 plants is nothing. It's pipsqueak. Now, when I plotted this, I plotted some of the grows that were like 12 plants because I could see them. And then I also wanted someone to say, well, how do you know you got everything, Chris? And I said, well, you know, because I plotted about 30 of the 12 plant grows. That's about how many I planted, about 30 of them. That's all I could see because they're really tiny. They're very hard to see. So out of the 7, so essentially in Josephine County, there are 70 OMMP OHA grows that are medical, that are between 13 and 48 plus like a couple that are bigger than 48. And so maybe half or more, 35 to 40 of those are in the valley that are legal between, they say that 13 and 48. So you got like about 35 or so OMMP grows that are bigger than 12. You got about 20 or more hemp grows that pass the HB 3000 testing regime that are in the valley. And then you've got like a little over 100 or more OLCC grows that are in the valley. Out of around 1,030 farms, that comes out to about 15% that are legal. And the other 85% are not legal. So that's how we get those numbers. Yes?
Okay, so next door to me, is 5-acre parcel, and the owner bulldozed, I would guess, between 2 and 3 other acres, and put up his house. And I've been friendly with people who used to go on the parish, and I have to know who's left and who's not, and then I'm separated and those, probably a couple thousand. How can I find out if that's a legal grow or what it's probably claimed to be growing?
So for those who didn't hear, there is a 5-acre parcel next door. They clear cut it. They probably clear cut 2 or 3 acres, and they put in maybe 2 or 3 acres of greenhouses. Is that what you're guessing, right? Did they just do it like recently? 2 years ago. So in 2018, which is 3 years ago, the OLCC stopped giving out licenses because they oversupplied the number of OLCC licenses. So that is not likely to be an OLCC farm. Furthermore, you can't take a 5-acre property and keep subdividing it because they have zoning laws against that. So you can only put 1 acre of OLCC grow there. So right off the bat, you can tell without the video cameras and without the proper legal setup and stuff, that's not likely to be an OLCC grow, right? Number 2, it could be a hemp grow, right? I will tell you this. The reason why everybody quit growing hemp in those gigantic fields that you saw in the past is because the hemp dropped from $4.50 per percent of CBD per pound, which is like a $40 to $5 pound for 10% CBD, to like $33.50 per percent, to $1.50 in 2020. And 2021, biomass was selling for like $1 a pound straight. Like you could not afford to put it on a tractor trailer truck and drive it more than like 500 to 1,000 miles. At that point, it wasn't worth it, right? And there's like 60,000 pounds of hemp sitting from the previous year's harvest out, near where those giant greenhouses were I showed you. They're just sitting in super sacks, rotting away from over a year because they just couldn't do anything with it. So if you think about like the economics of growing hemp, you could never have enough money and bulldoze all of that and clear cut all of that and put in all this infrastructure and bring all these people in and build these greenhouses for hemp.
But if you're going for recreational marijuana in a legal way.
No, the reason why I'm thinking probably not is because they haven't been giving OLCC licenses out for 3 years. Yeah, exactly. And furthermore, you can't have it bigger than like essentially 1 acre. And let me just say, the OLCC does not share the location of OLCC farms the way the ODA shares hemp farm information. You can just do a public records request and get all the hemp information. But you cannot do that with the OLCC. The sheriff can get some of that information and so forth. So I can't come right out and tell you exactly what's going on with that unless I happen to know the people. But what I can say is the chances are almost slim to none. John?
So, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that the numbers of farms were about 85% legal, is that right?
That's correct.
We said this before, but if you express that in terms of acreage, it's probably about 99%, right?
So I'm going to withhold making a comment on that because I have not yet finished. This is just phase 1. This is all going to get put on a GIS map layer, which is it's actually happening as we speak. And every one of these things is going to be square footage, estimated amount of water use, working with a scientist who spent many, many years in crop water usage. And we're going to figure out square footage, water use, all that sort of stuff. And it's all going to be geotagged, everything. We're going to get down. I'll be able to tell you about that in about another month or so. Yeah.
I was wondering, do you have any information on if they're going to lift the moratorium on OLCC licenses this January?
I don't know if the OLCC is going to lift the moratorium on licensing. I don't have a direct line to the politics. I can ask around. I would be surprised if they did because it's such a CF. But ultimately, my guess is that it probably, I know that that's been a discussion, and, maybe it's like a carrot, you were illegal, now let's just bring you into the regulatory framework. But I really can't imagine because they shut it down in 2018 because the OLCC farmers were oversupplying the market. So, yeah. Yep.
What is the attraction for these guys to want to grow here?
So, I'll tell you that like California like really hit hard in the past couple of years. And so all the bros from Humboldt and Garberville just came right up here, started paying 2 to 3 to 4 or 5 times the price for property, made it like impossible for people to actually buy these lands and do anything else with them. And again, we have a historical, cultural heritage where there's not a lot of people looking into what you're doing. We have low tax rates, It's just basically, they're not here for the climate. They are not here for the azimuth of the sun and the cold nights. They're here for the water, but there's water elsewhere. What they're here for is the fact that they can get away with it, right? And that's mainly what they're here for. They're not here for the environmental, terroir aspects like the Napa Valley, the Sonoma thing. No, it's just, they could be doing what they're doing in White City. Put a bunch of greenhouses on some pavement and just do it there. But you can't get away with it in White City. I'm going to move on now, okay?
So actually, Chris, I think water is different issue here than in White City. Because
Well,
around here, you can pull up
You make a very good point. Thank you for that.
In White City, you can't do that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You can just steal water more easily in the Illinois Valley than you can in White City. I was just imagining they just have big water bills, right? You know? All right, we're gonna move on now. The Illinois Valley Soil and Water, can we go back? The Soil and Water Conservation District focuses on improving agricultural water quality, okay? In the state of Oregon, there is a division of labor. Different agencies approach the problem from their own perspective, okay? The Soil and Water Conservation District does not do what the sheriff does. It doesn't do what other agencies do, right? However, I will point out that every illegal crop that is part of a large-scale cannabis industry needs a constant flow of water. We are the Soil and Water Conservation District, and water is a very important aspect of that. The following slides that we're going to go into now are going to explain the case for advocacy, all right? You can go to the next one. So we at the Soil and Water Conservation District can advocate to our elected and appointed officials statewide to implement and enforce the laws in a manner that encourages water conservation while striving to make sure that all beneficial uses have access to sufficient supplies. That is a direct quote from the policy manual of the Oregon Association of Conservation Districts. Next slide.
Can I just say something really
Yeah.
quick? I live in Williams, and I'm here today because of that. I'm asking the people that maybe are like-minded to, Senator Art Robinson, Republican Cape Junction, is trying to repeal the citation authority. And if you're familiar with this and you know what the citation authority, what they're trying to do, I'm asking for people, and I myself have contacted him, to present our views and support what Mark Stevenson in planning is trying to do with his citation authority. Because as of right now, Senator Art Robinson is going to try to, he's trying to repeal it, and he's going to force a vote on it. And my biggest concern is I don't understand why he would do that. It's written, well, it's written.
We're going to get to this.
Okay, but.
Yeah, and a big shout out to Mark Stevenson, head of the Community Planning Department at Josephine County, for his leadership and his ability to put together a really good package for the commissioners to vote on. And thank you, Dan DeYoung and Darren Fowler, for your support in that. The Ivy Soil and Water Conservation District has worked for generations to protect and preserve water rights, to sustain and stabilize them for landowners by helping fund the infrastructure and the engineering required to maintain these systems. We believe that another way we can help landowners is also by advocating to stop water theft by those who appropriate water for non-beneficial purposes. All right, moving on. Water quality is critically important for water users. Based on input from the community, these following water uses are deemed the most important and have high quality water. 1, residential commercial, that's homes and businesses. 2, in-stream, that's fish, recreation, and fire. 3, agriculture, legal crops only. I have no one of the 744 data points that came in on the community sentiment side of this project advocated and said, I want agricultural for illegal crops. Just didn't happen. I'm sure they're out there. Next slide. We are studying at the Soil and Water Conservation District and at the Watershed Council. In fact, the Watershed Council, the Illinois Valley Watershed Council, which is our partner organization headed up by Kevin O'Brien, they have started a committee called the Water Quality Committee, and it's going to be an exhaustive research of 30 years back, all the ways that water has entered the valley, all the ways that it has been used and flowed out of the valley. And I'll just take a moment to explain that this study, which is going to be longitudinal and take a lot of time, and it's going to be great, and the district will be assisting, is that water comes into the valley and it leaves the valley. And the way it leaves the valley is through evaporation, it flows out to the ocean, and it gets used. And the way it gets used is through, again, the residential commercial, the agricultural, irrigation, and those types of uses. So there's human use in some form or another, and then there's the flora, fauna, in-stream use, and as it flows out to the ocean. So we'll be studying how does the water enter, how does it get used, and how does it leave, and hopefully that'll give us a better understanding of what we're dealing with, because that's a data point that will take a while to get, but is worthwhile to get. Next slide. Historically, the number one form of pollution in our region is temperature. Low water volumes lead to higher temperatures. In this case, water quality equals water quantity. And I want to underline that cool water is necessary for fish and healthy rivers. And the way the rivers stay cool during the summer is there's a lot of groundwater that continually recharges the surface water, because in our region, the groundwater and the surface waters are connected in many places. And that's an important consideration. Also, extracting water out of the river that's not been regulated by a water right, no one knows how much water is getting sucked out. I'm gonna try to figure out. But ultimately, that starts to warm up the rivers because it starts to dry out, the aquifer goes down, it's not recharging the surface waters, and you're just taking right out of the surface water. Extraction of water for non-beneficial purposes, which is watering illegal crops, negatively impacts water quality by virtue of over-extraction. Water rights regulate the amount of water that can be extracted and for what water can be used for. I'll also point out one other thing. Mowing down the sides of the banks of the creeks and streams and rivers and mowing down the riparian areas causes the sun and the direct solar radiation to heat up the rivers. One of the most important aspect of temperature, more than extraction, is maintaining shade over the rivers, creeks, and streams. Maybe next slide. So here's a couple Oregon revised statutes, and the Oregon revised statutes are actual laws, right? And in fact, actually, there's a statute, there's a rule, an OAR, and then there's another statute. ORS 540610.1 states, quote, beneficial use shall be the basis, the measure, and the limit of all rights to the use of water in this state. And then there was a rule that was written that you can see on the Oregon Secretary of State's website. Quote, beneficial use means the reasonably efficient use of water without waste for a purpose consistent with the laws, rules, and the best interests of the people of the state. I don't think it gets any more clear-cut than that. Then the last one here is an issue that's ancillary to that, but has been a lot of concern for people, is ORS 540510.3a. A pertinency of water premises states, any water used under a permit or certificate issued by a municipality may be applied to beneficial use on lands to which the right is appurtenant if the use continues to be for municipal purposes. There's a debate about what municipal purposes means, and the Attorney General's opinion from 1993 makes it explicit that a municipal purpose includes a great number of things, but it does not include uses of water that are not ordinary or usual and that are not within the legal framework. So moving on to the next slide. Irrigating illegal crops is not a beneficial use of water, nor is it for a municipal purpose that is usual and ordinary. And usual and ordinary is an actual legal term. Next slide. So what's our next step here? Well, we can advocate for actions that improve agricultural water quality and its beneficial use. And so we're going to go through, and this is where we're shifting into now, what are we going to do? What action can we take? One, state legislators. We want to reach out to state legislators who can strengthen the agencies that must implement these statutes and rules. So you go to the legislators and then they bring the hammer. Who are the agencies? The Oregon Water Resources Department, so that they can implement water law, beneficial use and municipal purpose of water, including arrest by water master. ORS 54060. Quick show of hands. How many people knew that your local water master can go and arrest somebody? Okay, the two professionals in the room. Go look up that ORS, okay? They can literally arrest people. But you know what? I think it's one of those things that I don't know, I've never heard of it being done. Number 3, the Oregon Department of Agriculture. The legislature could help them implement agricultural water quality and hemp growing oversight. Can we go to the next slide? Oregon Department of Fish and Game, working with the Oregon State Police, they have a pair together, can protect stream habitat, resulting in improved water quality. You're going to start to see a lot of the terms called improved water quality, because the Soil and Water Conservation District functions and works on improving water quality. That is our #1 mandate. And so when we look through the lens about the division of labor, what the Soil and Water Conservation District can do, it's about improving water quality. The Josephine County Sheriff, Oregon State Police, and their partners can reduce illegal activity, ready for it, resulting in improved water quality. The OLCC can implement cannabis statutes and rules, resulting in improved water quality. Mind you, I'm going to tell you that all these agencies are overworked, understaffed, and underfunded. They are doing what they can currently. The Josephine County Codes, community development resulting in improved water quality. I believe it was written in the Associated Press that this week, Josephine County will be seeking to declare a state of emergency following Jackson County. We'll wait and see, but that's a big move. And 3 cheers again to the County Board of Commissioners. Number 8, Department of State Lands. They have removal fill laws near water, resulting in improved water quality. So if you bring your backhoe or your bulldozer or whatever, you start bulldozing around the riparian area, you're going to get the Department of State Lands down your back pretty quick. Next slide. Governor Brown, she can put pressure on government agencies and provide executive leadership, directing usage of funds and advocating to increase funding, resulting in improved water quality. 10, the county commissioners, Wally Hicks, the county legal counsel, who is working full-time on all these things, will now declare a state of emergency this week and seek support from the state, resulting in improved water quality. 3 cheers to Wally Hicks. Number 11, the Department of Environmental Quality can implement solid waste and other pollution actions, resulting in improved water quality. Next slide. We've all seen this quote in various manifestations going back hundreds of years. For problems to persist, it is only necessary for people to ignore them. Okay, moving on. The Illinois Valley Soil and Water Conservation District will be producing a thick report, that's me, on what happened in the Illinois Valley this year, how the environment and the community were impacted, and recommended solutions from the community. This report will include pictures, stories, and witness statements. Every elected official in the state within a few degrees of separation from this issue will receive a copy. It's going to be spiral bound, it's going to be put on the internet in PDF format, and we will make sure that this report shares all the information that you're seeing today in a very good, thick, dissertation type of way. And it's going to be out there for everyone to see for however long. Okay, next slide. Here it is. Guess what we can do? We can take action. It's one thing to be upset about this. It's one thing to be concerned about it. And it's quite another thing to get out there and do something. So there are a few things that we can do. I'm going to just list them right here. We can sign the petition that we have that's either in hard copy, that we have copies of here, and we can also go to change.org where we set up a petition, and you can go online and sign the petition there. And we will have the link is going to be on our website, the Illinois Valley Soil and Water Conservation District website. It's going to be on our Facebook page, and it's going to be on every other Facebook page throughout the valley. And we're going to send it out via email. We're going to make sure that that link is in everybody's computer or cell phone by the end of this week. It's live right now. However, there are a lot of folks who would just as soon sign a petition, and I've got 100 pages with 9 signatures each. You can get 900 signatures. Would love to get 1,000 signatures on these petitions. And, you know, there's been a lot of people that have said, Chris Hall, you got a target on your back. Are you scared? And I'm like, what choice do I have, right? There are a lot of folks who are legitimately concerned about, like, oh, can I put my name and my address on a petition, right? Well, we're not going to like be sharing these petitions wide, out region-wide. And I'll just take this moment to say that unless I'm wrong, please point it out. But my experience this summer has been that these grows don't want to like be causing any problems to get the sheriff to come. So they'd much rather use the carrot and buy you off for like 5 figures than they would being, you know, coming out and scaring you with a gun and stuff like that. All there are gunshots constantly. We recently got shot off a property. So in any case, we encourage people to have the courage of their convictions, to show up and to sign the petition and get their name out there. Because guess what? There's more of us than there are of them, and we have safety in numbers. Help circulate the petition. So tell your friends and neighbors, email the link around, and do a little arm twisting. Let's get them to sign the petition. And this is the change.org petition, by the way, can be like all of Southern work, because we all have the same problems. And so that's going to go out across the whole Rogue Valley. But the paper petitions that we can circulate around town, take a few before we leave tonight. Get 20, 30 signatures, bring them back to the offices. I'll show you where to do it. That would be really great. Next slide. 2, we have a number of different pre-written letters based on, and the letters are written based on the community sentiment. So here's all the community sentiment. This is all what you said. Well, I filtered that down into letters. And the other option is you can write your own letters too. And so what we have back here are 5 different pre-written letters to different groups. The governor, the state legislators, the Water Resources Department, the Oregon Department of Agriculture, the Department of Environmental Quality. Did I leave someone out? Those letters are tailored to those specific recipients. They're different from each other a little bit. And all you have to do is read them, decide whether or not it fits like what you care about, and you can sign your name, print, sign, and put your address at the bottom. And we will collect those at our office and bundle them and send them up to where they're going. If you want, you could just put it in your own envelope and mail it. The address is right there on the letter, but we want to make it easy for you. Question in the back?
Yes, if we like the letters that are printed, but if we think they need more added, can we add?
Yeah, of course. You can actually, you know, get to write in handwriting, or you can type up your own little thing, print it, and you can staple it to it and say, you know, it's like when you get, you know, you do a holiday card or a birthday card and there's not enough room to write, then you get yourself some lined paper, you keep on going, you stuff it in the letter. That's just perfect. If you want to deliver that stuff to us, just make sure you staple it together. Otherwise, put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it. Tracy.
If you even want to stay here and have a seat at a table, we've got pens, we've got paper, you can go before the meeting.
Sure.
And Chris, maybe also if you did like leave your email, these could all be emailed out to you after. So if you want to take the text and edit it on the computer and then print it out and mail it, you can do that.
That too. And in fact, actually, so I want to point out that Sophie here is interfacing with our folks on Zoom, and I have a Google Drive that has all these letters and has all this information. So you can actually just, we're going to make it public. You can just go right there and get it, and you can print them up. You can download it. You can cut and paste into an email body. And then this is another thing, is that another document I have back here that's also online is a 1-page that talks about all the main issues that people had with regard to community sentiment. And it's like that pie chart page that you saw without the pie chart. And it explains, like, those are the things people were concerned about. So if you get writer's block and you don't know what you're pissed about, there it is. Then on the back of that, and a couple more pages, is all the contact information. So the governor's office, the various state legislators, both in the House and the Senate that are in the southwest corner. We're not going to bug the folks outside of our region. The Water Resource Department, Water Resources Commission, the local water masters, You can write to the Department of Environmental Quality, the ODA. We have all of that information, names and emails and addresses. So you can take one of those documents as well. Sophie.
For the folks on Zoom, maybe if you could just speak to them, I can also share a link to these documents digitally. Is that right?
That's right. In fact, actually,
I'll do it.
we have a page on our Google Drive, the Soil Water Conservation District's Google Drive, and it actually has the link for the change.org, but it also has all the other information. So just to be clear, there's the 5 pre-written letters, but then there's also the stapled page that's up here that has the talking points that you can select from, and then 3 pages of contact information. So it's all been done for you. So if you want to write your own letter, you know, you've got all the contact information, both snail mail and email. Moving on, and we would like to help circulate these letters, okay? Moving on. Let's get 1,000 signatures and hundreds of letters, if not 1,000 letters. Let's be the valley that roars. Okay? This is the kind of thing that gets people's attention, is when you get a lot of signatures and you get a lot of letters, right? You know, Illinois Valley has been in the bottom left-hand corner of Oregon for a long time, and there are a lot of complaints from folks. We don't get a lot of love and attention from Salem because the state's big and we're quiet and we kind of like being left alone anyway, right? So anyway, I believe that we can take personal responsibility, community responsibility to stand up for what we believe in, have the courage of our convictions, and actually put our voices behind what we believe in and go out there and say, look, I've seen this map. Have you seen this map? I have seen like the bedlam and the mayhem that's going on in our town. And we have like all these people who, like, you know, we did market research and we can say, hey, this is what's wrong. We conducted market research with data points. And we have pictures, you know, and look no further than the stories that the sheriff can tell you about what he was busted. Tracy. Right, right, exactly. You can support local agriculture. Nicole.
I'm going to put out this piece of paper too. If anyone's not on the citizens concerned about cannabis criminality email list, we post things like this and other stuff and articles and letters people are writing. You can ask to be done that. We also do have a private Facebook page, but if you are to answer some questions, you can send an email request we can cover our Facebook group too, or Nancy or I will get back to them. This will be on the table.
Thank you, Nicole. That's citizens concerned about cannabis criminality. It's an email list that you can join, and it's there's also a Facebook page under the same name that there's about 180, 200 members of, and it's a private group. And if you want to get on it, just ask one of your neighbors. So let's go one more page here at your leisure. So, we want to make this easy on you. You can return your petitions and letters to the Soil and Water Conservation District office here in downtown. Who knows where Hamby Street is? It's right behind, like, you know, Dollar General and the storage, A1 storage. And so our address is 338 East Cottage Park Drive, Cave Junction, Oregon. It's 331. Hey, I'm the new guy. Okay, thank you very much. So hey, I'm the new guy. I probably got our address wrong. It's 331. Thank you, Tracy.
But the mailing address is correct.
The mailing address is correct. Okay, great. So the mailing address is P.O. Box 352, Cave Junction, Oregon, 97523. So what you can do is, if you come down Hamby Street, you'll come to the corner of Hamby and Cottage Park Drive, 1 block away, and there we are in the green buildings. And you can come on in 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday. I'm in the office, and I'll take your information.
Can you read out the phone number too?
Yes, and the phone number is 541-592-3731, and that is the office phone number. You can always leave a message if we don't pick up. So the idea is that if you don't want to like figure out getting a postage stamp and an envelope and do all of that, you can return it to us. We will bundle all the letters and we'll make sure that they're shipped off periodically to the recipients to where they're supposed to go. So you can bring so if you get a bunch of signed petition sheets, we're going to collect them. If you get a bunch of letters, we're going to collect them. Don't mail your petition sheets. Please bring them to the office, or you could put them in a manila envelope and mail them to us at P.O. Box 352. But one way or the other, let's make sure that I've printed up a huge number of like letters and petitions and all sorts of information. Let's just make sure that doesn't get used for fire starter in your wood stoves in the next 3 weeks. Let's try to get this taken care of by the second week of December, because we're in the holiday season and it's like Hollow Thanksmas or whatever, and it's like, let's make sure that we get this taken care of before everyone starts shutting down for the holidays. And so we got about a month, and let's make this the month that counted. There are folks who are very concerned. It's raining out. Well, there must not be a problem anymore, right? There's all sorts of like issues and concerns. Tracy, can you run me one of those petitions up here? I want to read the top of it.
Oh, here, I got one here.
You got one here. Okay. So I left off with, well, it's raining out. There can't be that much of a problem, right? What's the issue, right? I mean, all the pot's been harvested anyway, and let's just put the pitchforks back and put them in the shed and go bake a pie, right? No, absolutely not. So this petition here, I'm going to read you the top of this petition. This is the petition that's going to go to the Oregon state legislators and the governor's office and to all the agencies. We're going to make copies of this petition. It starts out with a quote from Sheriff Dave Daniel, November 4th, from the Associated Press. The Associated Press has been doing this is what their third article in our area that's national. Quote, "This summer was absolutely out of control," he said. "We're anticipating next year being just as bad, if not worse." Josephine County Sheriff Dave Daniel on November 4th, 2021 in the Associated Press. That was just a couple days ago, 3 days ago, all right? I bet you he knows what he's talking about. And he needs all the support he can get, okay? So to everybody who wants to complain about the sheriff, stop now. He's doing what he can. I have a front row seat to that knowledge. There's now it's time for us to do something, right? It's always easy to point to someone else. You're wasting water. Let's look at how we waste water. The negative impacts of illegal cannabis industrialization cannot be overstated. The environmental health of our watershed and our community well-being are suffering. Water quality and quantity have been seriously degraded by water theft and wanton pollution at a time of severe drought. We demand enforcement of water law to shut off water to the large-scale illegal grows and demand increased funding appropriations directed at enforcement agencies to make this possible. Narco-slavery and human rights violations are legion in our community. The wanton killing of wildlife, the constant gunshots, the drying of creek beds and residential wells, the rampant building code violations, the terror on the streets, and our fear of living among cartels who operate with impunity pose a significant existential threat. Think of the fish and the children. Shut off water to the large-scale illegal cannabis grows in 2022. All right? How did they get Al Capone? He was a murderer, and he perpetrated theft and crime on a scale that no one has ever understood for real. They got him on taxes. And how are we going to get these folks? We're going to get them by shutting off their water. You shut their water off, and in 4 days, that plant's dead and dry as a bone. And that's how we're going to do it, right? Okay. So let's stay in touch, and let's not lose momentum, and let's stick together. United we stand. And the last thing I'll say, give me 1 more second. The last thing I'll say is that there have been other extraction industries in this region. We had sluice mining, which just ripped through the region and laid waste, cutting open huge, areas and destroying the environment. We've had, timber harvesting for 1 to 2 to 3 times, right? That built all our houses, which we desperately need, right? But, those 2 things divided the community. But I will tell you, there's never been an extraction industry that I'm aware of, such as the cannabis, the industrial illegal cannabis, that has united our community. Our community was united by an extraction industry, whereas the other ones in the past divided us. And that is a remarkable fact. All right, thank you. Tracy has a question.
I have a description of how the orders.
Would you come up front?
Yeah. Sure. So in the back, there's 2 tables. One table has the 5 pre-written letters that you can sign on to. The other table has a stack of petitions and information if you want to write your own letter. There's clipboards, there's paper. If we can come on this side of the table and pick up the letters you want, go around the back, pick up petitions if you want to bring them for your friends. If you want to come sit down and fill them out, there's pens. You can do that and leave them here, or you can head on out the door if you're gonna do that later at home. So just kind of a flow so we're not all going the wrong direction. I'll help you when you get over there.
And consider yourselves we're deputizing you to be the folks who reach out to your community and get signatures, get letters signed, and spend the next month, come back to our office at 331 East Cottage Park Drive and pick up more supplies, pass along the link to the petition and so forth. Yes?
Sorry, it just makes me nervous having everybody crowd around the table.
Yes.
Can you do it some other way, spread out a little different? I'm sorry.
So there's a question.
also
Elliot, will you take this over?
Yeah.
Here. Speak up.
Why don't we can also pass them down the rows. So if you want to just stay in your seat, we'll make sure you get some.
Great.
And if you want to go over to the table and head out the door, that's also okay. Does that feel okay, Dr. Mecca? Okay. Thank you everyone so much for coming. Yeah.
And thank you.
Thank you. Okay. What? Oh, and for the folks on Zoom, Sophie is grabbing the change.org link for you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.